Hello everyone, this is Emily and I am a digital transformation consultant with Hyperbots. Today I am very pleased to have Jon Naseath on the call with me. Jon is a seasoned CFO with experience in larger companies as well as startups and public companies. So really glad to have you on the call with us, Jon.
It's a pleasure. Appreciate it.
So the topic for today, Jon, is purchasing without purchase orders. This is an area that many organizations grapple with, and I'm looking forward to your insights. So let's just dive in. The first thing that I'd want to actually ask you is, what are the common reasons that you've observed that leads to an organization purchases without using a purchase order?
A lot of times it comes down to using a purchase order may not be a key control, and it's just an additional process. So they find ways to work around it if they need to. A lot of times the ERP systems, whatever one you're using, have complicated interfaces. And so I've seen companies avoid not wanting to have to give everyone logins to those systems and looking for they could be opened other ways, but that's a key challenge, is the system itself.
Can you provide examples of situations where, bypassing the PO process might seem justifiable?
Well, I'd argue that there are times where it is justifiable. Usually I'll work and figure out where's the threshold. And so if purchases that are needed are below a threshold, there could be times where you decide as a company we're not going to do POs there. In those situations, what I usually do also is we'll either provide a credit card for individuals for those smaller purchases that has a set limit to still control it, or you could do we call it a blanket PO for certain areas. It's not specified to a given vendor, but it allows them a defined budget that they can use within that function or project.
And any risks that you see associated with making purchases without a purchase order?
Well, the purchase order itself is a tool. And I remember a situation where it was very difficult for projects and for different departments to understand how much budget they had, and they were constantly going over budget. And so we needed to find a way that enabled direct visibility to how much budget they had and how much they were within budget to spend something, and really allow them the authority to control their own department or function or project budgets. In that example, we found that POs could be a powerful tool because they're already doing all this work to figure out the budgets and their projects, and they want to feel like they own that budget. So allocating that budget out into different POs per what the project says vendors are going to need, or for a blanket PO to catch the remainder, was a powerful tool.
And from your experience, Jon, how does the absence of a PO process affect vendor relationships and negotiation power?
So especially when there's a large vendor or a strategic vendor, you'll negotiate at terms. And there's so much work that goes into establishing those contracts and all the terms around it. And so then opening up the PO based on that contract is a nice way to control and keep everything transparent and open. Now, there are often situations where you might not use all of the PO. And so it's important to have visibility to how much is being used, and it's not just purchase orders, but the purchase requests that then feed into those. And then at the same time, being able to see for vendor management how much available capacity is still on that old purchase order for when you need to do the next project. And maybe you have to discuss, can we roll that over into the next purchase order that wasn't used, or is that money need to be held back for the budget for another department?
So how do you view the cost and complexity of implementing a PO system, particularly for smaller businesses?
I don't know if it's about the size, or also the operational maturity of the organization. If you're just starting out, it's not your biggest priority. You just have to get customers in the door and make sales. Or if you're really just in the process of scaling and you have you feel like you're in control of the spending that's happening, then that's fine. But when you reach that point where you, as an organization, are so big and so complex that you don't really know or have control over the demands of spending, and people need to be able to, in different departments, own their own budgets instead of having kind of a centralized finance be approving every spend as it goes out. The nice thing about POs is it's kind of a pre-approval for future spend. And so it's allocating out budgets in an approved way. So I'd look for the complexity is when you need a solution and you're looking for a way to control your spending, POs, the whole process of that procurement process, can be very helpful.
So, Jon, do you believe there is a one size fits all approach to whether organizations should adopt a PO driven process, and why or why not?
I definitely don't think that there is just a one way. Many businesses are different. One example is do you have recurring spend that's happening, or is all of your stuff just transactional in nature and one-time spends? There's also opportunities to do a lot of that similar controls through different types of credit cards, and where you can get cash back from credit cards. But especially with larger spends, doing a purchase order, purchase request process is a powerful way to do it. Again, I want to call out that concept of an open PO or a blanket PO for things that you can still allocate it to a department or to a project, but then they can spend it against that blanket PO where it's not exactly known how much it's going to be. The other one I'd call out is for different utilities or recurring subscriptions. You might not need a PO because you're not getting an invoice, you're just paying a recurring bill, but still creating that blanket open PO for your own internal controls and budgeting can be helpful. You don't need to tell the customer or the supplier about that PO, but it's just a way to control budgets.
And what alternative approaches can organizations take if they find a full PO-driven process, too rigid or cumbersome?
Again, it's based on the size and the complexity of the organization. If you feel like you're controlling it through your own active communication of people in real time, then that's fine. It's just when that becomes too complex. Like I remember a situation where I had a product manager set up a strategic planning workshop with one of his best friends who was a vendor, and they were amazing at doing what they were doing. It was awesome strategy and marketing workshop over a few days. They flew a large team in, and there was dinners that we thought they were paying for. And I only got invited to one of the dinners. When I say we thought, that this product manager thought was being paid for by them. I attended one of the dinners and I started talking to them at the dinner and realized that they were going to be charging us for everything back through. That ended up being like 1.5 or almost $2 million for their advisory consulting project that really didn't result in any transformational change that we did. So that was problematic. So avoiding those kind of like spending and it's just a way of controlling spending is a nice way of thinking about it. And there can be, usually it gets put in place when something happens that shouldn't have happened is oftentimes when I see it come into place. It's a way to tighten up controls. It's oftentimes not a key control for Sarbanes-Oxley or something. So it's something that might not be required for, what accounting would push for. But as I think that as a finance leader, it's actually a very helpful tool from an FP&A perspective. And again, just watching for where the demand is, that's where it adds value.
That's pretty insightful. So in your opinion, what should organizations prioritize when deciding whether to implement a PO-driven process?
I like to look at finance from a perspective of a finance business partner. And so a lot of times where there's lots of departments or lots of projects that are all asking for money, literally the term is purchase request and purchase order. So I remember one time sitting down with a product development team in an organization where we had many different teams doing lots of different development, and they all had requests. And I sat down with them and we did a Lean Six Sigma style process map and mapped out current state. And then we looked at it and looked for waste in the process. And we looked at how we could optimize what was happening. And through that process of discussing how can we help these teams fix their own purchase request problems, I actually wrote in the box on the future state diagram, I said, this is a purchase request and you guys make a purchase request when you need money. And then that gets approved. And this is a purchase order. And when it's approved, it becomes a purchase order. And then you get to spend it. And they were like, wow, that's a great idea. We should do that all the time. And if I had just gone in from the beginning and said, oh, your answer is you need purchase requests and purchase orders, and let's put it in place, I'm sure there would have been pushback. But when you approach it, really, your question is like, when is it needed? And my answer is when your different departments and teams, your business partners in the business are asking for support, getting the funding that they need. This is a nice way of helping them feel like they're in at least participants and have a process for requesting funds. That's literally what it is.
So just one last question to summarize everything, Jon. AI is the buzz of the town. So how can AI help automate the PO process?
I think it's exciting what AI will be able to do for it, because a lot of, even if companies don't have what an accountant might call a purchase order, purchase request, procurement process, every company is doing procurement. Every company is figuring out how to buy things in their own ways. So the idea of taking that current state process and saying, well, how can AI enable that procurement process in whatever way it is? Maybe there's a future state where, based on different insights that AI is able to do, you can make it so that AI will be able to approve more of the purchase requests without needing so much manual approval or manual touches. And then certainly there's a threshold where you have to have the manual touch and manual check. But I think that AI could alert for risks when it needs to be double checked. Or I look at AI as providing kind of that first sanity check on things, and then it's really good at identifying problematic areas. But overall, it should be able to simplify and really expedite that purchase request process. You never want to end up in a situation where the business departments feel like they're not able to spend money because they're waiting on a PO, they're waiting on a purchase request approval. And so whether it's helping the AI could help identify the risks related to that purchase request, or it could help identify threshold approvals where certain ones can just be approved without manual touches. I think of it similarly to how, just a parallel example, when you do your taxes, say you're using TurboTax as an example, and you'll prepare your taxes, think of that as kind of quasi like a purchase request. And then in TurboTax, it'll go through everything and it will say, oh, we don't see any issues in this. And if there are issues, we'll support you in mitigating them, but we think this will be fine. And I'm a CPA. I'll confess I still use TurboTax Advanced stuff for my own accounting in different ways. And I think that similarly, AI could be used for purchase requests and purchase orders to do that risk profile and help the person who's submitting it. Usually it's stupid, simple things that might be wrong or might not be appropriate in a purchase order. I think that AI could help identify those for the person submitting it so they can modify them if needed and get everything to go through faster.
Thank you so much, John, for sharing your insights. It's clear that while a peer-driven process offers many benefits, it's not without its challenges. So your perspective on finding a balanced approach and leveraging AI to streamline the process will certainly help organizations make more informed decisions. So thank you so much for joining us today. It was great having you.